goes another 20-year-old.
Holy shit, I hate those guys.
Gotta hate 20-year-olds.
Fuck those guys.
Somebody help these 20-year-olds.
It's time to figure it out, Ricky.
Touch me.
Don't touch me. Don't fucking touch me. Welcome to Too Many Jams. It's a show about all things 20-year-old.
With help from friends, experts, and our own personal experiences, we hope to shed some light on those things that leave our age group lost and confused. We are online right now with one of our previous guests from the last, from 2 episodes ago, I believe, Ian Haase.
Yes.
And he has nicely joined us on this Tuesday afternoon to chat a little bit more about sort of what's going on in regards to the coronavirus and pandemic because it has gotten so serious as of late. So, Ian, what's going on, man? How are things?
Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, it's crazy times we're living in for sure. Hard to believe that it's accelerated so quickly, even in the past 2 weeks since I was on. But yeah, such is the case with infectious disease. It's math and exponential growth, and eventually things get real.
So can I'm just gonna say something because I think it's funny to note. We have just done 20 minutes of podcasting where we weren't recording properly. So we're just restarting now. If it seems a little awkward, it's because we've had this chat in the last 20 minutes already. But Ian is joining us virtually. If you're listening through your earbuds, his mic is just his computer mic, so it's not going to be like Robbie and I's microphones. And then if you're watching on the YouTube, it's just his webcam video. But Ian, on his episode, mentioned not only that he's running a business, a startup in this economic climate, but that he also historically had previous as a researcher in infectious diseases, which is why we decided to bring him back on, not only to talk about all the myths, all the stuff we've been hearing about Corona in the world, what we can do, what everyone should be doing, kind of what the status of this infectious disease is, but also to talk a little bit about, economic implications and being an entrepreneur and what that means for him. I want to get into all that today. We'll try to keep it brief because Ian does have a phone call in about 40 minutes. But Ian, you sent out an article recently to me, which I shared with Robbie, which talked about social containment, social distancing, its effects on the spread and how effective it really is. And I want to talk about that in this episode because there is implications to social distancing and basically the length of time we'll be quarantined and how this disease really does need to spread at a controlled rate in order to actually get through this in a reasonable timeline. What I wanted to talk about first, though, is I forget what we talked about in the last 20 minutes first, but we talked about something that led into the article nicely. Was it the speed at which this it was the speed at which it needs to go or it needs to be transferred?
Yeah, I mean, I think
what was that point?
Kick things off. There is a very fine balance right now between allowing at least enough cases that our healthcare system can manage. So we have some people building up immunity, sort of the so-called herd immunity to this. If you're almost too good at controlling it from the outset and just kind of have 5-10 cases a week, these sorts of measures could go on forever. It's a super tricky balance, though, again, because you're talking about exponential growth, and I think we're well beyond that in Ontario, for example, now in terms of trying to keep things normal to keep it going. But it's a really fine balance because it can get out of control so quickly because, everyone's healthcare system is already fairly constrained. But the slower, this thing does get through our population, the longer all of these measures are going to stay in place. So there is economic considerations as well, for sure.
One thing that I've been thinking about is, Canada, US, and Europe and stuff have been able to manage sort of the growth at which the virus spreads because we have these measures in place and the proper healthcare systems and infrastructure and such. But and I think just from looking at numbers, it hasn't gone that bad. But one thing I've been thinking about is what if the virus were to spread over into, for instance, poor parts of India or
it's getting there.
Africa as it slowly moves over there, and they don't really have the ability to handle it, or possible outcome of a or like an outbreak there, how
Right.
badly that will affect their livelihood.
Yeah,
I guess.
That's happening right now. It's scary to even think about when you see, a country like Italy getting overwhelmed and their mortality rate creeping up over kind of like 5%, because their healthcare system's overwhelmed. I mean, it's then you think of it like India just locked down 1.3 billion people today because it's spreading there. So yeah, it's hard to think about those things for sure.
Italy had that, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? They reported 800 deaths in one day. And the U.S. today reported their first 100 deaths in one day yesterday.
So what we're seeing is very modelable. It's very known. And Michael Osterholm, who was on Joe Rogan, we talked about recently, spoke about that this isn't news to the health community. You studied infectious diseases previously as a researcher. Is this something that could have been more prepped for? Like this, is this a shock to you as someone who did research this previously? Like, could you have seen something of this coming?
It's definitely shocking in terms of, I think we spoke earlier, it's definitely the craziest time I've ever been alive in my 40 plus years. There's always been a concern about this, and people are now digging up articles from like 5-10 years ago with people sort of predicting something like this might happen. But, it's that balance between, do you have the healthcare system that can potentially support these crazy epidemics, but our taxes are 4 times higher, or do you have to deal with these things when they come up, right? Because you can't prevent, you can't plan for every eventuality. And so, part of me is like, yeah, this was going to happen eventually, but the other part of me just thinks like we can't possibly been planning for this, given that it's never really happened for the past 100 years, right?
Yes, no, I get that, but it just seems so odd to me how fragile it is. A report just came in saying New York is already at a critical point in its hospitals. New York says they have 9 days until they run out of ventilators and supplies to keep people alive, which will mean people will die that is preventable. And it's the early days for America. And this is the result of people not taking it seriously. This is a result of people not quarantining properly, is an overloaded healthcare system. And, we're going to see that in all over the States, because I've been listening to my favorite podcasters. Even Joe Rogan, who had that expert on, has since been completely misinformed and misinforming his millions of listeners on how serious to take it. And they're all joking about staying in quarantine, and I think people are doing that now. But just how they talk about it, they say stuff like, oh, I guess, are the young people okay? I think they're fine. It's really only people 60 to 80 that are dying. I think the government's overreacting. Are they doing this? Who's calling the shots? Should we really be taking this seriously? I'm like, why even say that on these podcasts? Like, why even put those doubts out there? Because then I watch these young YouTubers making jokes about it, like coughing on their friends and like laughing and being one big joke, until LA is overrun. People are dying. And I think Canada's done a great job of being ahead of it, but it's only because we're a small country and we haven't got it yet. We were taken as not seriously as the States were. We were just fortunate enough to be a little bit smaller and a little bit more northern. I think that's the only difference. Yeah,
I agree. I think just one thing on the flip side of that, though, like, think how quickly we're relying on everyone to change their behavior, right? Like, that's a certain part of it. Like 3 weeks ago, everything was normal, even 2 weeks ago, right? And so I agree, and I certainly am on the side of, people should be social distancing more and taking this more seriously. But it's been a pretty big ask given how quickly this has come on. It's just crazy how infectious and how fast this is spreading. But where I think we're headed is more geographic isolation. So I think you're going to get certain regions and certain geographies that are better able to get this under control. Other parts, maybe even of the same country, are not. And you're going to see, differences start to emerge in terms of, some of the civil liberties and economic activity coming back in certain regions and maybe not others for a while, just because, it's going to become so geography specific, and, limiting movement between countries is going to be the next thing that's going to come into play in the next couple of weeks, I predict.
Yeah, you definitely can't blame anyone. And we would all be those people too if we were that age in the States and we were a YouTuber. Joe Rogan blew my mind because he had the expert on it like weeks before, and then just continued to be.
Would have set his head straight.
Agreed. Yeah.
But because he's just got such a big listener base, like it's intense. But as we've said, and as this article said, it may have already hit a critical exponential growth rate in the States, where the states, at least their population centers, will start to look like Italy, and then France looks like it's getting there, like Germany, Spain. It's getting into India, as we said. And the idea is, and what this article about social distancing said, is that it's not about eradicating the chain entirely. Because as you said, and the myth I wanted to bring up, and we brought up in the first 20 minutes that got deleted, is that if a community isolates perfectly and breaks a chain within their community of transfer, unless the whole world also does it perfectly, once borders open up and once things start working, and the virus will come back into that community. So it's really about slow containment. It's about slow exposure, about optimizing how many people are getting infected, so that the healthcare system can keep them alive while they basically become immune to this thing. And that's why social distancing is so important, because it's not going to be perfect.
Right.
So there will be still high exposures in Ontario, even with social distancing, but it's about curbing the exponential growth. And this article you sent, which I'll put in the show notes, has shown that not only does this work historically with the Spanish flu, but in Wuhan, in China, and the Chinese cities surrounding Wuhan, it's actually technically contained.
Mm-hmm.
The growth rate is no longer exponential. It's some people are even returning to work in Wuhan, and there is a few new cases, as you said, of people returning home. But this shows that we can get through this with proper social distancing. If China, the epicenter, can contain it, we can contain it with social distancing. And I think we wanted to do this podcast to urge people to do that. And do you think how Canada, like their sanctions at the moment, do you think this is like the best we have with what we know?
I think so. It's what we're doing now and what the government's doing now is taking incremental steps and then looking at the data, right? To see if they need to go harder, do they need to back off? The challenge is, because of this latency period, you have to make a decision and then see what things look like 5 or 6 days later, because, the transmission that's happened has already happened. And so we're not really going to know the impact of these, even these new measures with Ontario, curbing all non-essential businesses today. We'll know if that had an effect like 6 days from now, right? Which is kind of hard for people to wrap their head around, because they may see cases still skyrocketing and saying, oh, this isn't working, or, they'll see a dip and think it's working really fast. When in reality, you really do have to take time, and time is not necessarily a luxury we have with the disease right now. So in terms of the steps being taken right now, I support what both the federal and provincial governments have been doing. I think they've been taking the right steps right now, again, incrementally curbing it to see if we can sort of slow the spread. But to your point, no one's planning to cut it off entirely at this point. We just need to keep things within the capacity of our healthcare system, keep the mortality rate as low as we can. And ideally, you'll find that sort of balance of, getting people back to a somewhat normal life as fast as you can while limiting any deaths and mortality.
Which we'll get into the economic impact of that. But let's do that while we have our listeners' attention, while people in our demo are listening, because they are the most important demo. As the news said, the spreaders are the millennials, the one after it. I don't know if it's Gen Y or Z. I don't know what it's called, but these are the spreaders. Let's just get the facts out there. Let's dispel the myths. Starting off with stuff like, you hear people saying it's just old people, but you hear people saying that, we're young, we're fine, it's going to be okay. But the reality in Italy is that the majority of hospitalizations are 25 to 55.
Yep.
Young people can die from this. You can easily spread it before you know you have it. And let's just let's just get this out there that people, no matter what age you are, wash your fucking hands, stay 6 feet away, do what you can, because even if you're perfectly healthy, this can fuck you up or fuck a loved one up that has no health conditions, maybe even kill them.
Agreed.
It's not a joke.
I think, people are only looking at the mortality rate and thinking they're invincible, but there's a whole lot of other people who are also going to have permanent lung damage from this, right, as well. It's not just about that. It's about chronic conditions you'll have for the rest of your life. And so
it affects you afterwards as well.
Yeah, if you look at the pure chart, it's more risky for elderly and people with chronic conditions, but it's certainly still a pretty big risk I wouldn't even want to take sort of as a young person for your personal health. But in addition to your point, again, because you can be infectious and not even really have symptoms, you then become almost the most dangerous member of society because you're still continuing your business as normal. And everyone within their network has people who are way more at risk than themselves. And so unfortunately, we're kind of at mercy of everyone to sort of behave by the rules. There's one thing in infectious disease called super spreaders. You might have heard that term before, but it's not that every single person is infecting 2.5 other people. It's that 95% of people are following the rules and infecting less than one person. And one person's infecting, 1,000 people or something just because they are just completely not following it. They're in a very high traffic location or something. And so we really are at the mercy of sort of everyone playing by the rules with this social distancing thing.
The article mentioned how one super spreader in South Korea basically took the whole country down. It said how places like Japan and South Korea that have dealt with SARS before actually has a really great containment for infectious diseases. They take it seriously. And Korea was already contained before the outbreak went global. They had to contain to 30 cases for their entire country, even with their proximity to China. And then one super spreader, the 31st case, that's how much they had it tracked, gave it to thousands of people. I don't know if he was a public speaker or like what his or her role was, but they basically said that.
Do they know who it was specifically?
He gave it to so many people that it put their country over the critical mass.
Yeah, they identified who it was. Yeah.
Wow.
Just to give you an idea, like if you're doing this right, when someone tests positive, you're doing a crazy investigation involving hundreds of other tests, right? Like who's everyone you've been around, who are your parents, who are all your family. They test all those people and they usually find a few of those people are positive and don't know it. And then they isolate those people, right, as quickly as they can.
And they follow the chain.
They follow the chain and you have to do it as fast as you can. And, the issue in Canada and the US right now is we just simply don't have enough tests to do that, right? Testing is
especially in the US, right?
Enough. Yeah, the US is in a lot of trouble right now, unfortunately.
What is the testing procedure right now?
The testing procedure right now is generally a swab, so like a nasal swab they will take.
Yeah.
The issue...
A rectal swab, Robbie.
The issue...
Where do I sign up?
Yeah. The issue, from what I understand, isn't necessarily like the number of swabs, although I assume that's an issue, but it's more like the lab turnaround time. So they don't have enough capacity to like test and turn around these samples quickly enough. And so if you don't find out for like 4 or 5 days and people aren't abiding by their quarantine rules or whatever, you can see how it very quickly will just sort of spiral out of control, right? If you even have 1 or 2 people who are just not taking this seriously. And it's also the reason why there's such a big focus on making sure our healthcare practitioners have the adequate supplies, because they could easily become the super spreaders. They're exposed to the disease all the time. They've got tons of people panicking, coming into their clinics who don't have the disease. This is why we need like every single healthcare worker to not have COVID, because they could and even people working at grocery stores, those are the people I'm most concerned about, because they have the ability to turn into sort of those super spreader type people, because they just have such a large contact still, even with all this stuff cut down. And we need to make sure those people are staying protected. And
then on that note, how are they treating these people in the hospitals? Like, what is, like, I don't know if you have the answer to this or no. It's just one thing that I've been curious about.
As far as I know right now, they are generally not really fully admitting you to the hospital unless you are very close to needing a ventilator or needing to go into the ICU. So people who come in, who get tested, who are positive, they're sent home to isolation, and then they are actually physically monitored at that point. So they'll have people calling them multiple times per day. We'll see if it gets to that, but they may even have, physically people like knocking on the door to make sure they're home, because they got to take this serious, right? You can't be leaving even if you start to feel better. And so right now they're really limiting the people they actually admit into the hospital for those sort of most urgent cases. Everyone else with COVID is getting sent home.
Interesting.
This is just such a real deal scenario. And I don't know if I had a few other questions I wanted to ask. So with infectious diseases like this, people get it, immunities eventually build. Are there different strains of COVID-19? Some that will give you that permanent damage, some that are more benign, or not benign, but like more chill. Are there different strains of the same disease that are being passed around?
That's a good question. So there's definitely a lot of different strains of coronavirus happening. Like the common cold is a coronavirus in itself. With COVID-19 in particular, I've been looking at this out of personal interest. It's too early to say, but data is suggesting that it is mutating a little bit, just very, very minorly. But I think where, this presents challenges for the vaccine world as well, right? Because as there's a huge race right now to build up vaccines. A number of other countries working on it. And at the end of the day, that probably is the way that we're going to get this in line. But, if this disease evolves enough and has sort of these multiple seasonal strains coming out, we could end up that we have something like influenza on our hands, which is, every year you get your flu shot. Some years it's 80, 90% effective. Other years it might be kind of a bad year. It's 20, 30%. Yeah. So this is sort of the thing no one's talking about yet, because I think it's too early to see exactly what happens. But it's definitely within the realm of possibility that this is just now another virus that we're going to have to be dealing with on kind of a seasonal basis. It's my hope, there's so much attention on this right now that the normal vaccine process, which can take 18 to 24 months, I think that is really going to be sped up. I think the FDA and everyone's sort of working together to sort of speed up these clinical trials. They're generally very locked down for safety and health reasons, but there's just so many deaths occurring now. I think the cost benefit of trying to accelerate some of these vaccine trials probably makes a bit of sense. But, just to give you an idea, there's still no vaccine for Zika. I don't know if you guys remember the Zika virus from 3-4 years down in the Caribbean.
Can you Ian, slow down for a second, let your video catch up to you here? Okay, so from Zika?
Yeah, from the Zika virus, just so you guys are aware, that I think first cropped up 3 or 4 years ago in the Caribbean, and there just still isn't a vaccine developed for that disease. So just to give you an idea of kind of the complexity, I do think there's enough attention that we'll get there. But the mutation is one thing that I think we'll start to learn a bit more over time, but it's just one other sort of concerning angle from this whole thing in terms of how long is this thing going to be around?
Yeah, I didn't know if we mentioned the vaccines in this segment or the segment that got deleted. But as you said, the 1 to 2 years a vaccine can normally take. Michael Osterholm talked about this as well. It's not that there aren't vaccines already developed right now. I don't know if we talked about this already in this segment.
No, I think
or not.
it was first time around. Yeah.
Okay, so you said there are already vaccines developed right now. It's not hard to get a vaccine immediately. It's about whether that vaccine A is deadly to people or harmful, or B, how well does it actually work? They can kill the disease, attack the disease right away in labs. They have it isolated. They have all that. So you said speeding up the process means reducing the timelines and the stringent requirements to test and get it out to the public. In a sense, and it's awful to say, but it's kind of a blessing that the U.S. is getting hit so hard, because they're going to turn the entirety of their might towards it, the entirety of their economy and their GDP, and hopefully get that vaccine out quicker. But I know Canada is real. Aren't they the leading edge right now?
Yeah, I heard Saskatchewan.
They are, yeah. There's a number, and as you'll see in a lot of the federal government announcements, every time they've announced money for people, it also includes R&D, right? They're trying to lead in this. And another thing to keep in mind is, a country that develops a vaccine is eventually going to distribute worldwide, but the first million doses are going to their own citizens, right? So there's no reason why every country on earth shouldn't be trying to develop something right now to get it out the door. And from what I've heard as well, there's a lot of collaboration. Normally people would get bogged down in like IP and who owns what. And from what I hear, globally, scientists are sharing information as fast as they can right now, which is really refreshing to see because it means that we'll get there sooner.
Hopefully some billionaires also just sprinkle the pot with, a few hundo from their foundations.
Do you think,
Rob,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask if you had any myths or like any questions for Ian before we move on to like more of the economic and
I guess one of the questions I was just thinking about is, they obviously know the source of where this all came from and such, and with how everything's played out, like the main concern right now is working to try and contain and stop it. Do you think after everything's kind of once they got a little bit of control on it and things settled down a little bit, like there's going to be a bit of an investigation into like where's to blame, or like whether there'll be like any sanctions or that kind of stuff, like punishment for like improperly managing like how this all played out?
That's a really good question. I think already you're seeing online, like, again, the world we live in, what is the truth? Was it U.S. military? All these crazy theories, right, about who did what. So I think if you go down that road, you're immediately going to get into countries just blaming one another, misinformation. I mean, it's clear, from what I've seen, that it started from bats in the market, and a lot of diseases transition in that manner, Ebola and SARS and others as well. But I don't know. That's a tough question, probably left for an economist, not me, but I would have a hard time thinking they're going to be able to pin it down to the point that they can get, the whole world to agree, like these guys fucked up or something.
Yeah. I've heard that China is finally doing some self-reflection on their wet markets. Wet markets are the term for these markets that have tons of different live animals in improper storage, because you have to understand, like, you can't judge China for how it's been doing things forever, for how it feeds its billions of people.
No, totally.
And they eat anything over there. These wet markets have, like, I'm not being racist, cats, dogs, ferrets, birds, rats, any animal that can be consumed, there is a taste for in China. They just have so many people. There is like 20 million people in Wuhan. We're like, their amount of people is, like, you think about 20 million people. Yeah, it's staggering in a city. So I think China has finally said no more wet markets. Like,
they completely banned it. I saw that actually.
Yeah, because they did create SARS as well. It was and
it was a similar thing. It was like a snake and bat combination.
A snake and bat fucked, and
from everything I'm reading, it's bats and Ebola as bats as well. Like there's a lot of diseases that come from bats, other animals as well. But I mean, it's good to see them reflecting on that for sure. It'd be good to know, to get to the bottom of this. But my personal opinion, I think it's better for us to take steps to figure out how we can better prepare and lock things down like really quickly when something like this does happen, because it's going to happen again. It's just a matter of, what animal or what timing or what geography. But, we since the beginning of time have struggled with infectious disease, and I think that's good.
Well, that's another point that they made in that article that you sent us is couple countries that had dealt with the SARS outbreak had done a better job at stopping the what do they call it? Stopping the curve,
flattening the curve.
Yeah, flattening the curve. And they pointed that out in the graphs that they showed.
For sure. Yeah. No, it's there's a lot you can learn from this, and again, if this thing's all about time, right? The longer you wait, the more drastic the measures have to be. And it would have seemed crazy like 3 weeks ago to say like shut all the borders and close everything down, but we'd probably all still be working now and like in school, if we'd been able to do that back then. And so the longer you wait with these things, the crazier the measures you have to take are. And unfortunately, we are where we are, but I'm still hopeful that Canada in particular, I still think that we're going to get through this thing. I think people are finally starting to listen and pay attention, certainly from what I can see sort of in my neighborhood and the once a week that I do go out, it's dead out there. So I think people are paying attention now, and I can only hope that we just start to see those benefits of that, because I think that will encourage people to just continue on. The last few weeks might be the hardest because you're going to see it going down and nothing's going to get lifted. But at least, while things are going up, I think it's really hard to convince people like, you're going to lose your job, don't go to work. But if they can just see that this is starting to work, I think it's going to re-energize people.
So we've talked a lot about the coronavirus. I think we've said enough where that the people listening hopefully can, for their own sake, for their family's sake, for the people around them sake, take this as serious as they can. Like hyper awareness when you're shopping, keep your distance, be responsible. Like it's not a joke. Lysol things down. It's really a lot about the breath. In the transmission and lineups and stuff like that. We've talked about the seriousness of the disease, how it can cause permanent lung damage and stuff, even for young people. It's not something to toy around with and get because you're young and it's all good. Another thing I wanted to bring up before we transition quickly to the economics of all this, because it's really affecting a lot of the people I know, is vaping and cigarettes. I'm on my last few pods of
the
Juul, and all I can think of is, what the fuck am I thinking? If this is a respiratory disease, like I wonder if even casual vaping can like stress the lungs and cause, just an added risk factor, or like if drinking or lack of sleeping. Like I think, is the idea just to stay as healthy as humanly possible?
I think so. Yeah. Whether it's vaping or drinking or even just getting enough sleep, or like staying active is super hard, right? When you're stuck in your house. I mean, everyone acts like they will, but it's hard to do stuff when you're out of your routine. And so, yeah, at this point, staying as active and as healthy as you can within your confines is probably the best advice. And to your point, I listened to your last podcast, and I would treat anything that isn't like social distancing and washing your hands as a myth at this point. Like, there's absolutely no evidence that like drinking water helps, or like any of the other things you guys were talking about. Is like literally stay away from people and wash your hands. And one thing that's popped up a bit that I've done a bit more research on as well is your biggest risk is really contact surfaces. If someone coughs on you, yes, there's an airborne droplet risk, but the actual like something floating around in the air that you're going to breathe in is actually a really low risk overall. It's really contact with surfaces. And so the washing hands thing is, shopping on the weekend, I wipe down every single thing I got, every box, every bag of chips.
So the video just got a bit glitchy. So you went shopping?
Yeah. I went shopping this weekend, and I'll tell you, for my own personal, I got family home and everything. I Lysol wiped down everything when I got home. I washed all my fruit and veggies, wiped down all my cereal boxes, bags of chips, just a Lysol wipe, because it really is the contact surfaces that are the biggest risk.
Yeah, that's what I was reading, that it can stay alive on certain surfaces in particular for up to 9 days.
Yeah, they're still doing more research on that, but yeah, even the lowest surface I read is staying alive on for like 2 days or something, which is just crazy, right? For a virus, and up to 9 days on certain surfaces. So that's why really hand washing and sort of the physical touching, even if something's been in your house for 3 days and you haven't wiped it down, it could still be there, right? It's really crazy. So even washing your hands when you're home and you're not going out a lot is good.
It's also, I guess, awareness touching your face, which brings me to my quarantine beard, which is
I got one too.
Not fashionable. Yeah, you got yours. Rob, how you looking there?
Not bad. Sort of standard stubble for me.
It's not fashionable. It makes me feel like I'm going through something, like a playoff beard, like you're in it for the long haul. But it's making me touch my face so much, and so I'm debating what to do.
I'm treating it like a playoff beard at this point. I'm not shaving until we're through this.
I want everyone to come out with like 3-4 inches of beard. Like I want us to like emerge in the sunlight. Like I can't actually like I can't wait until we're through this. Like, let's talk about the impacts of this on us, because especially us in the gig economy, I was already at my limits of spending and debt and balancing, and being shut down for 3 months is gonna be hard. And hopefully the government money can support a little bit, but it's affected me and my roommates. It's affected people that have been laid off. But you, as someone who just started a business, just raised capital, we're on the leading edge of the cannabis industry. Again, I don't know if this got cut off, but Ian was on our episode two episodes ago. Listen to it to hear about his story. But he started with partners Motif Labs, which is a cannabis oil refinery company. And what's this looking like for you? Like, what's going on at Motif? What do you do now? Like, how do you handle this?
Sure. First of all, honestly, my heart goes out to you guys. Anyone in the gig economy, or even more broadly, who's kind of laid off or suffering right now. It's a crazy time for everyone. I mean, I don't want to put myself as the exception or anything, but certainly running a small business through this time is equally challenging, with the added stress of having 11 employees who are kind of counting on you as well. So because we have a young workforce, and I think a lot of companies have been similar in that we were able to transition pretty quick with tech tools to working remotely, still getting a lot done. I'd say the team's probably at like 60 to 70% productivity. There's certain things that we have to do at the site as a group that we just aren't doing right now. But the one benefit, I guess I could say, we've been trying to get licensed and get to revenue for so long, but we're almost in like a benefit now where we weren't operational and much bigger. Because if we been operating and having 40 or 50 people right now, it'd be a totally different conversation, right? And we probably would be talking layoffs and that sort of thing. But for us right now, we just immediately cut any and all spending. We're trying to keep everyone employed as long as we can, so we basically cut every single other thing to zero. And we're just reassessing monthly to see what things look like, are things opening up, and where are sort of these opportunities to get back in the market. But it's tough all around. We're paying a close eye on all the government incentives coming out. I think there's going to be more coming, but everyone's being hit hard, and we can only hope that it really is only kind of 4 to 6 weeks. Hopefully most people have an emergency built up, to put them through that. But even if not, I think measures definitely need to be taken to allow people to, people shouldn't be forced to pay rent. No one should be getting kicked out. Everyone should have access to safe, healthy food. Like, we need to really go back. In some ways, I heard someone say the other day, this could be a really good time to test universal basic income. We're now forced to, right? Like, instead of all these programs, why not just start giving everyone money, a base allowance? You can always cut it off when things go back to normal. But to me, it seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
Just something to think about, right? Like, our world is radically different. If you were ever thinking of testing that out, seems like the time to me.
First I've heard of that.
You know what? It is a time. We said in that one episode too, if you're going to turn any negative into a positive, this is our struggle. This is our generation's struggle. We've been fortunate not to have been drafted or go through some of the things that can really, really be terrible for a generation. But even for Robbie and I, like, the breath of fresh air, that's a bad thing to say, because with the climate. But the beat has been kind of a bit of a reflection on how close to the line we're living, our lifestyle, the lack of safety nets, the lack of insurance. Mm-hmm. And as much as you said, your heart goes out to us. The amount of debt we're in and the stage we're at, it's really okay. We don't have dependents. This is a great time for us to learn this lesson, and for 20-year-olds to learn this lesson, right, that the world is as this fragile.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it's people, and the next crisis is fucked. And you might be 50 and 60 by the time it happens next, but never forget how quickly things can get like this. And have a little money, have cash. Don't be entirely dependent on the market. Staying healthy is important at all times. Like, I don't know. It's just like all these wake-up calls, and I really hope my short-term memory doesn't get as bad as it always does with stuff like this, and I can carry this forward. But yeah, we got to figure it out. I've been painting my parents' house for the last 4 days. Like, I've completely put my life on hold.
Yeah. No, it is. And it's I think all we can do at this point is try and think of positives that could possibly come out of this, right? Like, I'm sure you guys have been online a lot, as we all have, sort of with this increased downtime, and the amount of like connection and people coming together and working together. And every day I'm reading inspiring stories about, hackathons to build ventilators and people hand sewing masks for people.
Yes.
And if there's some way we can just
making hand sanitizer.
Yeah, we just, things are, assuming we're going to come out of this and the majority of the population is going to be okay, and just sort of look at it as a lesson learned, which I hope is where things are going to go. I really do hope we can bottle some of this connectedness to make sure we sort of never go back to those former ways, because we have an opportunity now where everyone's guards down, and it just seems like a good time to just change the way we do things.
It really does make the world feel like we're in it together. I think that's, if anything, this will lighten tensions between Russia and China and show that, like, hey, we might hate each other for no reason. We're now all in this together. Also, people are really worried about the markets. I know my parents' friends, their retirements took a 50% cut. And this is a big deal. And, hopefully a lot of them are liquid enough to wait it out for it to recover. But I also am hoping that the previous recession taught people that you can leave your money in the market if it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, don't yank it all out and cause a crash. Like, things will rebound. A lot of people made a lot of money buying low in the market. And what I'm hearing from people that are in it is that people are constantly trying to buy into the market low, which is keeping it from crashing. And so I think people learn from those crises. Hopefully, they haven't been doing as much subprime mortgages in the States, and hopefully people don't yank all their money out at once and then actually lose an entire market of nest eggs. But with the virus, I think positivity will come. Global, we're in this together feeling will come. The young people will hopefully learn to manage their finances and their lifestyle a little bit less close to the edge. Use the time. Yeah.
One quick note on the markets. I'd say my feeling is always, if the markets never come back, you have bigger problems to worry about. So don't panic. Don't pull your money out when it's low. I mean, it's literally going right back up, which is done since the beginning of time. Or for some reason, this is different and something terrible happens, it never comes back up. Then it didn't matter anyway.
Shit's going back.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if there's anything else on the radar that you can think of, or Robbie, you can think of. We talked about how serious to take it, the true implications of this disease. Finances, look to the government for help. Look for gigs you can do. If you can take care of elderly people's groceries or mow their lawns for cash. I know people in the gig economy are doing whatever they can. Find ways to provide value for your company, so you don't get laid off. Working from home.
And there are certain industries that are thriving right now and hiring like crazy as well, right? So just being flexible and adaptable, and it may not be the exact position you want or pay as much as your last job, but there's certainly, some companies right now who are going to be looking for a lot of people to help.
Amazon. I was reading Amazon. Jeff Bezos
Walmart
said that he is looking for 100,000 new positions people, right now because they're getting so many orders that need to be filled through Amazon, like delivery. People are going online, don't want to go out, right?
Yeah,
crazy.
Amazon's. I'm actually interested to see how Amazon comes out of all this, because they were already dominant enough, and now this just sort of proves it's the model, right? And so are we going to see just other big companies finally flip over to the Amazon model, or are they just going to crush everyone, right? I mean,
what's Walmart, Canadian Tire, Home Hardware? They have terrible home delivery. Walmart, I think, is pretty good, but these hardware and kind of have everything stores are so behind the curve. They're going to have to transition.
Yeah.
It's just, Robbie and I, we just were on this peak of releasing this song, and we had this whole plan to blow up right here in the spring. So every time I think why me, I think of Vietnam and other times, and I'm like, okay, never mind, it's all good.
It's kind of a blessing in some ways too, that just because we have been pushed behind, with our timeline overall, and this little added buffer gives us more time to like sort of string things together and do things properly. So I think
hopefully some time
it'll be
to create
beneficial
as well, continue creating as well.
Oh, totally.
Yep. We're gonna write. What I'm thinking. I got a laundry list. I want to become unreal at calisthenics. You know those guys that can like hang sideways on a flagpole and do like all this body weight stuff. I think I'm gonna become a pro video gamer. Yeah, I'm putting in the hours at the moment, and I think you should get on Call of Duty because I'm in debt, and this is hilarious. This is my mindset. Like just paying my rent and paying my bills. I went into my line of credit. And I still went out and bought a $300 gaming controller and a $100 headset because I'm locked in. Maybe I'll start live streaming.
Wait, $300 controller? What? Like, why so much?
We don't need to talk anymore about that. It's just a pro. It's a pro gaming controller. I need it because I'm obviously a pro.
What is a pro? How does a pro controller differ from a regular controller?
It's got buttons on the back, so you never have to take your thumbs off the aim sticks to hit like jump and reload and slide. The aim sticks are a bit longer, so you have more control. You know what? We don't need to talk about this. The triggers don't have as long a pull.
Have you reached that high of a level in this last week?
I live in Call of Duty. Ian, you said you used to be big into the Call of Duty in university.
Yeah, when Black Ops came out, I was addicted for a good while there. So I feel your pain for sure.
I'm just saying, you want to squat up? I'm looking for a third a lot. A great way to kill the time.
It could be. Unfortunately, I still got a business to run and kids, but maybe in the evenings we'll see.
Forget about that. Join me. No, I'm just kidding. Video games are great. I want to make more content, like get good at like making videos and covers of us playing at home, taking photos, all the stuff that I put on the back burners. I can't do anything else. I'm just going to have some fun with it while I can. And I think the more I talk about it, the more I get an immediate sense of panic, but it goes down to a long-term feeling of at least I understand what's going on. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me again.
Hopefully the listeners do too. And is there any resources, anything that they can watch or stay up to date? What do you use?
There's a few links I can send you for the show notes. Other than that, again, I just find that the daily CBC briefings are just even watching. I think a lot of people are watching the news too much, but I think if just once a day you can kind of tune in and get the Coles notes of sort of the day's activities. It is important because things are changing so quickly. So, looking one day and not looking for 4 days, it isn't good enough at this point. If you're trying to be a good citizen, you need to be checking in daily on what's happening and what restrictions are out there. But for me, it's been refreshing to see all levels of government working together. There's been no infighting. It's been nice to see that, right? In an increasingly partisan world. I mean, it's been nice to see. And so I think there is some really good info there because no one's fighting and trying to give things an angle anymore. It's just straight facts. So keep doing that. And the one link I sent you, there's probably 2 others I'd send as well if people just want a high level of where things are at and why this is happening. But otherwise, just check the news.
And don't panic.
Don't panic. We'll get through it.
Don't panic. Make informed decisions and just have empathy for people in places like India or Africa, Italy, and respect them by doing what you can here. Because we will be the ones that go to help them when we're back to normal as well.
Well said.
Anything else from you, Rob?
No, that was great. Thanks a lot, Ian.
All right, let's go, boys. Quarantine life. Stay strong.
Thanks, everyone.
We got this.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
Chat later.
Take care, guys. Cheers.
I would stand in line for this. It's always good in life for this.